evolution. So last week we kind of touched on some subjects that to me were stimulating as far as opening your mind a little bit to maybe how all of the different religions that we experience and the things that are on this planet are actually more connected than what we think, right? Or more than what we've actually been given the opportunity to see. And so this week, I've brought Daniel Crumpton back on with us, and I have asked him to have a fairly serious discussion and give some opinions on Catholicism. And so in doing that, I thought it would also be, of course, like kind of stirring the pot a little bit more to add in Gary and of course myself, and then hoping that Stephen will jump in if he has questions or opinions. So I hope everyone will help me welcome Daniel to the show.
No,
hi, Daniel.
nobody wants to welcome me.
I know. I'm sorry because
Hi,
like
Daniel.
what I need Stephen to teach me how to actually use this mixer thing, and then I could have done like this whole applause thing, and everybody would have been clapping, and we would have been great. But sorry,
That's okay. That placated my ego.
we like to do that.
Mm-hmm. You guys you're gonna have to excuse me if you hear me smacking because my mom made an excellent flounder dinner.
Ooh.
And so I am eating that as we speak. So,
oh, yeah.
and I'm not apologetic about it. It's great. I'm gonna smack.
You go. It's
right.
Just fine. I have some things I wanted to say anyway, so that's go ahead. You just keep shoving that in there, and then when you're all done, then you'll have probably lots to say. Because I've been on a roll today.
All right, shoot.
This whole thing with Catholicism, how it spurred for me is that there were some things brought to my attention that maybe could be viewed in a different way as far as how the Catholic religion has kind of been given a bad rap. I'm trying to think of the most diplomatic way to express how I expressed myself, because if I repeat on the air the things that I said, it's not really that I'd get in trouble, but it'll just be like, oh, there she goes again.
Oh, come on, we want to hear it anyway.
Well, okay, so you know where I'm going with this, Daniel?
I have a feeling, yeah.
Are you feeling nervous?
But you shouldn't be afraid to say it. I mean, yeah, it's a difficult mountain to top. Catholicism. Yeah, it's really easy to point at Catholicism and say, you guys are the devil. You know, the whole institution is evil.
Yeah.
And you're responsible for everything. So let's go ahead and get the stuff that they are responsible for out of the way, okay?
Yeah.
One, we do know what we know. I mean, you don't have to be a scholar or anything like that. We know that around 300 AD, AD, that Constantine ordered the Council of Nicaea. We know that. Now, our go-to point in history is that date for Catholicism. It's when he brought the bishops together. They decided the canon of the Bible. It's when the foundations of the faith was determined. Now, you know, you don't have to know this stuff too awful intimately to know that that's where your King James Bible comes from, which is what all your denominations are based off of. Well, we're not going to get to that right now. We'll get to Catholicism. We know that the Roman government turned into a religious entity in an attempt to escape destruction. So you had the Roman Empire morph into a religious state rather than a political state. Is everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So after that, I mean, you have a whole lot of wars. You have the Inquisition. You have a lot of nasty stuff that the Catholic Church was in charge of. Now, here's where we get to what I found funny was the Inquisition. The Inquisition was a rather funny thing, and to me, it just smacked of women. That the Catholic Church was very anti-woman.
This is where I start to get riled up and pissed off, right? Because I agree with you 100%. Also, my heritage at this point is starting to be scrutinized and eliminated and prosecuted hung, burned. I mean, let's go down the list. So it's like, yeah, so go ahead.
Right. This is where you see a heavy persecution against women. And we have to ask why. Why is it that the Catholic Church is so anti-woman? Why do they not want women teaching, preaching, being religious leaders? Yeah. What's the deal with that? You have to look at that. Anybody who's read the Bible unadulterated knows that the Bible does not put women down whatsoever. The Bible uplifts women to such a high degree that, like if you look at the book of Romans, I've had several discussions with people about this who go, well, the Bible is so downgrading of women. No, it's not. It's very uplifting of women. In fact, it says that women are the foundation of the spiritual structure, that a man's duty is to protect a woman in order to maintain that spiritual structure. That's what it says if you read it unadulterated.
Right.
If you read it, in certain churches, it's going to say, well, women need to shut up and stay in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant. But that's not what it says.
Right.
All right?
Are parts of it have been interpreted in a different way, or do you think they're open to interpretation, or are you just saying that if you read the correct version, that there's nothing to be misinterpreted?
You're going to get different interpretations. I always stick with the King James, period, because it's got more words in it. The other ones have been heavily deleted, which is kind of the point. But you'll get different interpretations amongst different denominations. I mean, so it's all like I said last time, it's like Baskin Robbins. It's pick your flavor with Christianity. But on the whole, during the Inquisition, the females were heavily targeted, and that was a reason why.
Now, somebody's asking in the chat, are you talking about the Old or the New Testament?
Both.
Okay, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, both. I don't read I read King James throughout. Not that I'm saying that that's better than, the other translations are deleted heavily. You're going to find a lot less words and a lot less books in those newer translations. It's not easier to read. Just basically that they get new copyrights on those things every other year. The King James Bible is probably the best one, you want to stick with if you really want to get it, But I'm not saying you're going to go to hell if you read an NIV. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not like that. But so we have to look at what the Inquisition was about, and it was this. I believe, this is me, like I said last time, I'm not building a church, that we had a 2,000 year period where the feminine divine was to go missing or be oppressed. Okay?
Right.
Now, from Jesus up until 2012, we've been in this state of Pisces. This age of Pisces, the two fish. And that's why you see Jesus referring to fish all the time. Well, after 2012, we have re-entered into a feminine entity, a feminine divine.
Aquarian, right?
Aquarius, yeah. And so we're starting to remember about, Divine Mother, Goddess, the Mother Goddess that's in the Bible. The Bible talks about the Mother Goddess all the time. The fact that you weren't taught that doesn't really mean much to me. You didn't know. And so...
Well, it's not taught. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it seems like, at least from my exposure, especially in the Catholic religion, I mean, they're pretty set on, everything is pretty much based in the man. I mean, we as women should be grateful to men because, he gave up his rib for us.
Well, excuse me, good flounder. Well, with the Catholic Church, what we find now, the current Pope is what's his name? Francis? Yeah. He's starting to bend a lot. And he has to, because now, that we have this kind of information that's right at our fingertips, anybody can look this stuff up. So the Catholic Church has one option, evolve or die, right? You can't live in a world anymore where it's suitable to say that women serve no purpose in spirituality. You can't do that. Not today. Not with the rise of new ageism coming on.
Well, and I think you're right, but I think it's also, when you're saying the feminine is kind of coming back, unhiding, revealing itself again, there's a lot of women that would say, well, there's been the feminist movement, there's been the women's movement going on for years, blah, 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 since the 60s and all these other things. And I'd like you to give a little clarification between femininity and being a feminist, if you don't mind, from a male point of view.
Wow, that's a tough one. Femininity is not dominance. Femininity is, to me, I guess my definition would be, whereas the masculine tends to rule with an iron fist, femininity rules with a velvet glove.
Respect.
From behind. Does it in an intellectual type way. Whereas masculinity is more aggressive and more, I'm in charge. Women don't do that when they're in their proper role. Women do it, they don't really care if they're in control, as long as they are. You know what I mean?
Well, and it kind of comes down to, in my opinion, it's like, to me, this sounds this is kind of probably a weird statement, but to me, I don't want to play all the man game. Like, I don't want to be the one who plays the man role. But I want to be recognized as a woman if I'm doing the same, and I'm not necessarily even a job or just even, in life, I'm on that same equal level. I want the same respect. I want the same money. I want the same type of whatever it is because I've earned it, not because it should be given to me or handed to me because of whatever my sexual thing is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're tired of victim mentalization.
I can't stand it. And this is where we're going to swing back to Catholicism. Because to me, when I read a post today, I embarrassed myself a little bit on Facebook because, as I'm sure everyone will be shocked, I did not filter myself at all. And did you see it by any chance, Daniel?
No, I'm going to be honest with you. I slept until like 3.
Oh, perfect. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's good.
I'm a writer, so.
Oh, that's good. No, I'm glad to hear that because I was thinking, oh, great. Anyway, it ended up being resolved with the person that, it was Rhonda. I'm just going to say it. She won't care. She has a very heavy Catholic background. And so she integrates a lot of the things that we talk about into this Catholic idea.
Right.
And after talking with her, I could see her point a lot better. But when I first read the post, I was like, you have got to be motherfucking kidding me. Like, I could not believe that we are going to go dive back. I mean, you're talking, like, to me, it felt like we were jumping back hundreds, thousands of years all of a sudden. Because if we don't fall down and worship and do this and do that, we're all going to hell. And, oh my God, I just about flipped out. I mean, I just can't. I'm willing to be open and listen and take knowledge from everything and anything that's out there. Mm-hmm. When you start pouring all this fear-based bullshit into people to make them act or do something in a certain way, I feel like that's not evolving. That's falling back into fear. It's falling back into what we know when we get scared. That's my opinion.
Yeah, but saying that anything Catholic denotes that is kind of a slight on our part. We can't do that. There are great benefits to the Catholic religion. If you look at it the way that it was started, which was a transference from a political thing to a spiritual thing, and then you look at what kind of they were taking their spiritual notes from, was paganism. It's like I like to say poltergeist. They changed the tombstones, but they didn't move the graves. What was Zeus became Jesus. What was Peter became, Apollo and whatnot. They didn't really stop worshiping the gods of old. They just called them by different names, and
right.
And so we have a connection where we go, okay, well, all of us are kind of pagan in some type of a way. We believe that there are other entities out there, so the Catholic Church isn't too far off with that. They were making it more comfortable for their age and time to call them Jesus and Peter and Matthew and all that. But it's the same thing, kind of. So we can't slight the Catholic Church for that. And we can't really slight them for practices because there's nothing original in Catholicism that wasn't around in Buddhism, Hinduism, or, Brahmanism. It's all an amalgamation. Buddhists have prayer beads. The Catholic Church didn't come up with that. Buddhists have been using prayer beads for a very long time. And so Catholics just, changed it. So I think for me that you can approach Catholicism with a certain amount of respect in that it's a Frankenstein of other religions, which really, honestly, what religion isn't?
But do you think, and I agree with you, and it's so funny because after I talked to you last week, changed my perception, and I knew that talking to you today, I would also be able to kind of change my perception and maybe open myself up a little bit more. But I feel like still that you're right, they did Frankenstein it, but they also then turned it into a monster.
Yeah, yeah, it did. I mean, and you're dealing with a system that's in place right now. And I was so big into biblical prophecy. I still am. I love reading about prophecy in the Bible. And you talk about the 7-year tribulation and the Antichrist system and all of that. But it's really obvious to anybody who's ever read the Bible that the Antichrist system that's in the Bible, and I'm not the first person to say this, so it's nothing controversial, is the Pope system, is the system of an outside Messiah, or somebody who is sitting in the place of Christ, which is what the words vicar of Christ means, instead of Christ, in the place of the Christ. And so you have, in biblical prophecy, this prophecy of the end time scenario and all that, and it foretells you about the Catholic Church. And so you have a lot of harm in the Catholic Church. I mean, I don't want to get off into it right now, but there are years of being opened up to the fact that these guys are predators of children is a huge thing. Very huge.
It's very huge to me. I mean, that's one of the, I'll be honest with you, I mean, I have my own, opinions about things, but most of, when you start really diving into being a conspiracy theorist or whatever people want to call it, I don't like that word, but that's the title. So, or you really jump into different things and you start finding out that almost everything, including our frickin' money system, is connected in through the Catholic Church, the Vatican. And so even taking one piece out of what they're doing, I'm not saying that you're wrong by any means, and it's probably a much more realistic and open point of view, but for me, I just find it hard to swallow anything because they're just so, it's not just about the being pedophiles and using children and fear to generate power and all these other things. It's the way that it has separated the people and taken away the power of each individual so that they feel like with what you're saying, like it's outside of you. Mm-hmm. Everything is outside of you. You have no power and you basically are just, oh, thank you, Slim, truth seeker. That's way better. Basically you're just at the mercy of this God who has created you, but if you piss him off, boy, he's gonna do something really bad to you.
Yeah. No, any type of religion that teaches you a disconnect from God, you really need to look at. And I'm not defending the Catholic Church. I think that a lot of their rituals and things like that, if you understand them, they're great. I don't have a problem praying to different saints. You know what I mean? The saint of lost keys. I have no problem whatsoever shooting a prayer to that cat.
Especially when you've been looking for 20 freaking minutes.
Yeah, I got no problem with that. I got no problem. I do have a problem with confessional. The Bible tells you not to do that. Don't confess your sins to another man. I'm not going to call anybody father, master, guru, or rabbi. The Bible says...
Oh, wait, back up. Back up just a second there.
Yeah, sure.
You said something about in the Bible it says do not confess to another man. Please explain that, because you and I have had discussions about how you do that, but maybe some of our listeners aren't quite, that seems confusing since the Catholic Church tells you to confess everything or you're going to hell.
Oh, that's crazy. No, the Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible says, that basically because of Christ, what Christ did on the cross, there is no more middleman, right? That you have the authority and the right to step into the throne room of God yourself as your own priest and confess your sins to God. That there is nobody in the middle of you. That's why the veil was ripped. The Bible is a beautiful story that gives you that authority, that says you are not some simple, humble sheep that have to go through a church, a clergy, or a man to get to God. No, not anymore. The whole point of Christ coming was to destroy that system. And to allow you the right to address God yourself, like Abraham. Abraham and Moses and all these other figures, they would argue with God. Can you imagine arguing with God and winning the argument?
It'd be fabulous.
That's the story of the Bible. That is what's in the Bible. And because of, unfortunately, the Catholic Church and its denominations, which we'll get into, all denominations of the quote unquote Christian faith are being controlled by the Catholic Church. Anybody who doesn't know that or doesn't think that is way out there in delusion land.
Well, that's one of the things that I read, and today I wanted to be sure that I had, I didn't want to just talk crap, I did some research, and basically what I found is exactly what you just said. Every version of Christianity is somehow based out of Catholicism.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
All right, give me just a second, okay?
Okay, so here's my thought, and Gary, this is a great time for you to jump in here, because when you hear about the Catholic Church and you hear about Catholicism and you read stuff, especially you're exposed a lot to just as much as I am online, what are your thoughts? Because you don't have a lot of religious background, and that's one of the things I thought would be good to have your opinion.
I don't, but I've always been drawn more to kind of the Eastern type religions, and what I've been reading lately, like to do with like the Yoga Sutras, and they have kind of like two paths. You have a devotional path, and you have a path that is more inward towards the self. And just from what I've picked up from like Catholicism, Christianity, that type of stuff, it seems to me that's what's missing. It's like you only seem to have the devotional part, and I don't really see as much emphasis on the going within. Whereas in the Eastern religions, even the devotional path, it's seen that the end product of that devotion of worshipping something outside yourself, whether it's a god, whether it's a tree, whether it's an image of the sun, it's always leading back to the self. That's the one thing that it may be in the Bible. I've never read the whole of the Bible, it may be in there, but it doesn't seem to be the thing that's emphasized, just from what I see.
Okay. Sorry about that. I had a dog that was looking at me like he was going to kill me if I didn't give him my plate.
Did you hear what Gary just said? Because to me, that's interesting.
No, go ahead.
Gary, kind of just, throw that at him again.
I was just kind of comparing what I've picked up from Catholicism, Christianity, and that. I don't know a lot about it, I'll be honest, but just comparing it to kind of some of the Eastern religions, and saying that in those there's usually like a devotional path, and then there's a path that is kind of directly inward, and the devotional path leads at the end to that inward path, so it all goes within. And I just feel that from what I see from Catholicism, Christianity, and that's not what is emphasized a lot of the time. It seems to be more devotional and putting outside of yourself. That's just my,
Yeah, from my point of view, that is the direction of the Catholic Church and its subsidiaries that you have to have kind of an allegiance to the church, to the mother church, the Catholic Church. But where we get into, this is just my belief. People can have their own interpretations. That's fine. Like I said before, I'm not an expert on anything. I'm just a guy, who has went through the gamut. And what I found was that if you go back to the Reformation, okay, let me get this straight. let me think about this logically for just a minute. You've had over 3 centuries of a Spanish Inquisition where anybody who questioned the Pope or the cardinals or the church or anything was tarred and feathered, strung up, burned at the stake, put in an Iron Maiden, all of these horrible things. And then all of a sudden, you got this one little guy named Martin Luther that goes and nails a thesis up on a door and they let him live? Whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
This right here doesn't sit well with the official narrative. What this actually says to me is controlled opposition. That's what it says to me. After centuries of nobility and townspeople getting upset with the Inquisition and with the authority of the Pope and the Church, the Church made the decision to go ahead and allow controlled opposition, which is your different denominations. Because from Martin Luther, you get, your Lutherans, your Methodists, and all that. And so when we come over here to America, we have all these different denominations. It's like Baskin Robbins. You pick your flavor. But ultimately, who is it really controlled by? Well, thanks to the work of people like Jordan Maxwell and Santos Bonacci and David Icke and people like that, we know that anybody who files for a 501c3 tax exempt status here in America, that is actually under the control of Vatican City. So it doesn't matter what your religion is, what your church is, any of that. If you have that 501c3 in one way, shape, or form, you are answering to the Pope. And so we see how far, their limbs stretch into our lives. And then when we go even further, we find out that even when you have a marriage certificate, which I will never do, a birth certificate, things like that, the Vatican actually gets a copy of that. And they perform black magic rituals, which I believe,
this is where, okay, so now we're going into exactly where my mind goes as soon as we start talking about the Catholic Church, because I think you're right. I think when it originated, it probably was just a group of people who had the same ideas about things or whatever the deal was, and they came in and decided that they were going to impose that on everyone else and blah, blah, blah. All the power games that we still see today, they're just called something else. Mm-hmm. But the difference is, and people can believe it or not, but to me, when you start playing with black magic and you start playing, there's a reason that you torture people. There's a reason that you use that energy of fear, right, and sacrifice, and especially of virgins and babies. People think, oh, that's disgusting, and they go into this whole thing. They have no idea what it even means, how disgusting it is. Because it's the energetic vibration that then they capture in the soul of that being. And that has a lot of power. We are, as human beings, we hold a lot of power. And so when on top of that, you start thinking or maybe integrating, and I know this may be a little, I don't know how, you and I have never talked about this, but I had read something about a child who came in and kept talking about Mars. Mm-hmm. And he kept saying that he was he's like 9 years old and he knew things about Mars that they actually were able to, verify and things, but there's no way he could have known. And so it seems like it could be true. And one of the things that he said is that the souls were being captured and put into stones, right?
That's, I would say that, anytime we get flashes or we remember things from past lives, we're always getting a fragment. It's like looking through a glass darkly, or we're trying to remember a dream. It's never, this is exactly how it is. It always has some type of a analogy or puzzle that we're supposed to figure out. I think we do that on purpose to ourselves, but from what I gather, Saturn is the planet that's kind of taken that role.
He says that. This little kid actually says that. He says that, I just watched this thing. It's so weird that you would know about this too, or that you're kind of confirming what, anyway, he actually said that what happened is that on Mars, they destroyed the planet basically, or something ended up happening, and so that there are still some beings there, but they're underground, and that what their job is basically to capture these souls in these rock things, and they're sent from Saturn, like mm-hmm. somehow Saturn controls whatever's going on, and then somehow they send them to Earth. Or no, I'm lying about that. Wait, it was that some of them broke and it shot them down to Earth.
Right.
Or something like, I mean, it was pretty pretty out there. You know what I mean? But it was like,
any story that you hear, there's some type of a thing happening in our solar system with the souls of humanity and the different planets. I would recommend people go out, and I know it was a shit of a movie and critics hated it, but I would rent that movie John Carter of Mars. And that will, like, if you can watch that and look for the esoteric things in that movie, your nose will bleed. You'll go, oh my God. You know, Disney is telling you so much in that movie.
Isn't that? And I think it's interesting that Disney does seem to have a lot of insight. When, you do your research again, there's another connection to the Vatican. Mm-hmm. There's another you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, what is going on with the fact that, because it's like what you said earlier about how you gotta be in you have to have alliance, or you have to commit that, you are saved by Christ, or no, what is it? It's, what do you have to say when you're, that Christ died for you and all of that? It's like really sounding out again that you don't have to take any, in my opinion, you don't have to take any responsibility because it's already been done for you.
Died for your sins, is that what you mean?
Yeah, when you're talking, well, if Jesus died for your sins, well, what the fuck do you have to worry about? Because if he died for all your sins, you can just go hog wild and then say, oh, I'm sorry, and then it's all done, right? Well, why do you even have to say sorry if he already died for your sins? Like, I don't understand that whole thing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's not what the Bible teaches. I mean, the Bible doesn't. That's what a lot of your Christian denominations think, but that's not exactly what it says in the text itself. It says, faith without works is dead. One man says he has faith, another has works. So your faith is determined by your works, according to the Bible. The Bible doesn't take the responsibility of the individual to do the work and to go on their journey away from them. And any religion that tells you that is a false religion, in my opinion. In any religion that says, oh, well, somebody else did it all for you, that's not going to help you out at all. You can't.
Well, yeah, and I don't even understand how it can be that. Well, okay, so even in the chat, let me look here. I'm sorry, I don't want to. Slim says, "What the heck is original sin?" And that's what always gets me too. It's like that's how there's so many contradictions about original sin, in my opinion, because they say, well, until a child is 7, they're not really responsible for their sins, blah blah blah. But yet you're born a sinner, and you have to be baptized to clear your soul or something, and then you, as long as you follow these rules, you're good, right?
Well, let's make sure we understand. None of that is in the Bible. All right. Okay. None of that stuff is in the Bible. You're not going to find original sin anywhere in the Bible. Okay. You're not going to find that. You're not going to find, you have to be baptized to be, Jesus said to, I can't think of his name, Matthias, I think his name was. I'm not quite sure. It really doesn't matter. I know the book. I've read it, but, he says you have to be born again. All right. You have to be born of water and of fire. Okay. Now, what is this saying? Is it saying, you gotta be dunked in a pool and baptized in that way? No, the church just made that up as a symbol, as a sign, as an allegory. All right. Born of water and of fire. And when the priest asked him, well, what do you mean by that? How can a man jump back in his mother's womb? Jesus said you have to be born of the maternal and of the spirit. The fire is the fire of the kundalini, the serpent, the coiled serpent that we all talk about in, spiritual circles. The Bible is so rife with that teaching of the kundalini rising. And Christians don't see it because it's not in their terms.
Well, I was going to say, that sparked a lot of conversation in the chat last week when you said that, because somebody said, you can't combine kundalini with Christianity, that's bullshit, or whatever. So give some explanation into that, because...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, excuse me. Well, for one thing... Hang on just a second. Let me clear my throat. Yeah, that didn't sound pretty. For one thing, yeah, the Bible is rife with kundalini. If you go back to the Old Testament and you see the children of Israel, they were getting bit by serpents. And God tells Moses, he says, take a bronze snake and put it on a pole. And then when the people of Israel, the children of Israel come and look at it, they'll be healed. And so you have this imagery there of this serpent on a stick. if you go back to Genesis, and like I said before, I'm a Gnostic, so I have a different interpretation of Genesis than Christians do. For example, if you read Genesis 1 in Hebrew, it says, in the beginning the gods created the heavens and the earth, okay? Not singular and not masculine. It's plural and includes the feminine. Now, you'll get some Christians who know a little bit. They'll come back and say, oh no, that's talking about the plurality of power in the Godhead. No, it's not. All right, that's bullshit. Anybody who tells you that is just grasping at straws. The word God in Genesis 1 is gods, and it's feminine and masculine. The gods and the goddesses. That's what it says, okay? Now, after that, when you get the Lord God, you have the word Jahveh, which is singular and masculine. This is an entity, okay? Well, Christians, because they mess up that part in Genesis, they misinterpret the whole book. They believe that when they read Genesis 1 and it says, in the beginning God, they believe it's this masculine Zeus-looking guy on a throne that did all that. But they don't understand that it's a plurality of gods, including the feminine. And this cat that comes along later that says, don't do this, don't do that, that is a separate entity. But Christians don't know that.
Well, they even if they did, that wouldn't serve, in my opinion, that wouldn't serve the purpose. Because, and I hate to, I don't want to just be like, I'm going to slam the shit out of this, but it's like, it seems like there's so much suppression, and the whole idea, in my opinion, was like, people were being naughty. They weren't being nice, and they weren't doing the right thing, and so somebody in power decided, well, let's make them all be nice, and let's scare the shit out of them, and make them think that if they're not good, or if they don't follow these rules, that they'll spend eternity in hell, and then, we'll torture them a little bit, and we'll do this, and we'll take this, and we'll do that. You know what I'm saying? It was like such a manipulation that how can there be any validity now to anything that they represent? And I'm not talking about taking the Bible. I'm talking about the whole religion base.
Well, I mean, to me, that's a tragedy. My mom used to tell me when I was a little kid, when I would get like a splinter in my toe or my hand, she would say, if you don't, she would get her needle out and she would burn her needle, and she would say, if you don't let me get that splinter out, a tree is going to grow out of your hand or your foot. And I was so scared because I could visualize a tree growing out of my frickin' hand or my foot. Now, was she lying? Yep. Yeah, she was. But what did she tell me to lie for? Because I would not have allowed her to do what she intended to do unless I had a little bit of fear. So we can't slight them for that. Well, we can. You can. But don't slight them too much. Don't go Catholic hating or Christian hating because of that thing. Is there a hell? In my opinion, yes, there is. Is there a heaven? In my opinion, yeah, there is. But my perspective of heaven and hell is much like a Hindu would say, is that heaven is here right now, and so is hell. I mean, you could walk down the street and find 50 people in heaven, and you can find 50 people in hell.
Well, and see, this is another thing that, again, it's always outside. That's all part of the fear and manipulation. Well, if you're good and you follow the rules, then you get the ultimate reward. And it's like, instead of it being, I don't know, instead of it being an individual anything, it's about, you have to do this, this, and this to get this. And if you do this, this, and this, or don't do this, or you miss one piece, or you do the, whatever it is, well, then it's not an option. Like, you're there forever. You're going to hell forever.
No, see, let's get to the Bible. And this is something that I actually put on my father's, memorial. I live in the South. I live in Georgia, so there's a lot of fundamentalist Christians down here. And a lot of my family members are those fundamentalist Christians who, it's something else. You try expressing a different viewpoint and, oh my God. But nevertheless, they saw my dad as somebody who when he died, went to hell. And the reason that they believe that is because of their dogmatism and their doctrine, right? And I had put on his memorial the scripture that I think I'll actually look it up real quick. Hang on just a second. Actually, I don't have to. I had put on his memorial because a lot of my siblings, they were like, oh, Daddy's in hell. You know, he never confessed Jesus Christ as Lord, right? Wow, that's a harsh one.
I mean, how, like, that to me is like, that is such a basis of, first of all, everything that they originally stated that they're against. That's so much judgment, right? So many, which I know you have another whole opinion on that, but go ahead with your story.
So, the passage I put on his memorial, which is what I tell Christians, is the Bible says that it talks about Lot, Abraham's nephew. Okay, now Lot is only mentioned in the Old Testament and one reference in the New Testament. And when you read about Lot in the Old Testament, nothing is good. There is no good deed this dude ever did. It's all bad. Okay, from him taking his uncle's land, from him throwing his daughters out for the people of Sodom and Gomorrah to rape. Nothing is good about Lot, okay? But when you get to the New Testament and you read in what Christians call the Hall of Faith, Lot is mentioned, and it says that righteous man Lot vexed his soul daily. Now, it calls Lot righteous, okay? A man who there is no good deed recorded about. It calls him a righteous man. Why? Because he believed. His faith was enough, okay? This flies in the face of every organized religion that you have, because it says that we are saved exactly like Christians will tell you, though they don't believe it. We're saved by grace, by faith, by believing, right? And that's what's in the book. But they'll say that in one turn, and then they'll put their tongue in their other cheek, and they'll say, yeah, but you have to cut your hair, wear these clothes, not listen to these artists, and things like that. For example, when I was a teenager, if you don't mind,
No.
when I was a teenager, I felt my connection with spirituality just fine. I was like, me and God are good. I understand there is a God. I don't know exactly what its form is, but I know it's there. But I had a lot of people that was trying to get me into the church, so to speak. And so I lost a bet one day to an older sibling who was into the church. And a part of the bet was that I go and spend the weekend with them and go to church that Sunday. And I was like, okay, well, I don't really like this idea, but all right, I'll do it, right? Now, I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan. I love music. I love, music from the 70s. I don't know why. I guess I'm an old soul, but that's just me. So I go out to his house, and he's already ready for me, because he's got to win my soul for the Lord, He's got this DVD, or excuse me, back then it was a VHS. I dated myself, but and this VHS is they sold their souls for rock and roll. You guys familiar with this?
I actually, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, it's like this 2-hour extravaganza on how every musician you've ever listened to is controlled by the devil, right? And I'm like 13 or 14. And so he plays this for me. And I'm sitting there and I'm hanging, I'm doing like New Kids on the Block would say, I'm hanging tough. Until it gets to Led Zeppelin. And it's like, if you play Stairway to Heaven backwards, this is actually what it says, And it's like some Hail Satan, all this good shit. And I'm like, oh my God, I never, so I'm scared. Now I'm scared, and at the end of the video, go ahead.
So of course, that was the whole purpose, right?
Yeah, it was to scare you. So at the end of the video, they give me the sales pitch. You're either going to go to heaven or you're going to go to hell. And I was like, I don't want to go to hell. That place sounds like it sucks, Who wants to do that, So I go to church the next morning and I'm like, still scared. And I'm like, and my hair is down to my knees at this point, by the way. So I'm like in church and I'm like, I'm going to hell. I'm fucking going to hell. God's going to kill me, because I was born. I had original sin. I don't know. Some shit that Adam and Eve did just fucked me up and I'm going to hell, So, right? So the preacher says, many on that day will say unto me, Lord, Lord, have we not called and prophesied in your name? And I will say, depart from me, ye that work iniquity. I never knew you. And I was so trembled. And so they called for an altar call. Come down here in front of everybody, and show your humble, submission to what we're saying. bowed down before us, Now in non-Catholic denominations, they say that's a show of vanity, really. But they still do it, come down here and show that you're really humble, in front of everybody. So I did, I was scared out of my mind. And so I did what the preacher said, and I went down there to the altar and I bowed down. And, I prayed, and I prayed a sincere prayer. I was like, God, I know I'm a sinner, and I do not.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was, and I genuinely was. I really thought about, I had a spiritual moment. So I'm not saying that all that stuff is useless. It's useful to bring you to terms with your own frailty. And so I had that moment, and I was like, God, I know I'm a douchebag, and, can you please forgive me for all that stuff, because I really have been a douchebag. And I got up and I felt great. I felt like I was reborn, right? I really did have this experience where I felt like everything that I put down there on that altar, it had nothing to do with the preacher. It had nothing to do with the walls of that church. It was me and what I conceptualized as God having an honest moment together, which is, if there's anything that anybody can get from anything I say, that's it. You being naked in front of God, without the glamour, without the pomp of your ego. You just being honest with God. Talk to God like it's your dad or your mom or whoever your best friend is, because that is what God wants. And so I had that moment where I was like, God, forgive me. I was a douche. I shouldn't have done this, and that.
Okay. I mean, and I get that. And I think at that point in your life, it probably was a grand transition for you.
Sure.
But why does it have to be outside of you?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. And see, that was the thing that I didn't understand at the time. It took me years to get, but that was an internal thing. It wasn't outside of myself, because ultimately, who was I talking to?
Right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was talking to myself. Well, after I got up, and I felt great. I felt like I'd had this religious experience, a spiritual experience. And, church is dismissed, and I'm riding home back to my hometown with my sibling that brought me there. The first thing that he said, I felt great, and I was smiling, I was happy, and he said, how you feel? I was like, I feel great. I felt like I'm forgiven for everything that I've ever done. And he said, so when are you going to cut your hair?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was the first thing I heard. When are you going to cut your hair? And I looked at him, I was confused, and I said, what do you mean? He goes, you know why you have your hair that long? It's because you're rebelling against society. And then I realized that organized religion is about conformity. It's not about liberation, it's about conformity. But they have to bait the hook with freedom.
And see, that's to me, and that's evil to me.
It is.
So, and this is, people can say how witches or Wiccan or, all of these different things, they try and relate us to Satanism. But yet, when I hear and see things like that, that is closer to Satanism than anything that I was ever reared to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because you're taking someone's hope and someone's fear and manipulating it to your own will. Whether it's, even though they're not taking it like, oh, this is for me, ha ha ha. It's still their belief, their indoctrination.
Right.
That's harmful to me.
It is. But like I said, don't hold it against, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't get mad at Jesus because people do that. They do it in Hinduism too, and I know witches that do it too. So it's across the board that ultimately people want to control other people. And God, whatever you call God, it could be mother, it could be father, it could be the moon, whatever, it doesn't really matter, is not about that. And God argues for itself every day, and we miss it. When the sun comes up, God is showing its supremacy. It's showing its authority over us. It flaunts it every day when the sun comes up, when the wind blows, when the moon comes up. God is all around us. We can't hold it against God that there are people who wish to control, Catholic Church included, that put words in his mouth, or its mouth, and make us do certain things. Santos Bonacci talks a lot about the purpose of religion is like a tunnel. You have to go through the darkness to get to the light. So no matter what religion that you end up in, you have to seek that light at the end of the tunnel and make your way out. I'm thankful for all the years that I spent in the Baptist church. I'm very thankful. I never would have read the Bible if it wasn't for that, and so I'm thankful for that. But, when it comes to controlling or dominating other people, it's like that movie, The Book of Eli, with Denzel Washington and, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but, Gary Oldman. Anybody who's seen it or not seen it, I'm going to ruin it real quick, but if you watch that movie, The Book of Eli, it quite clearly says that in the hands of one person, a book can be a great tool of healing. In the hands of another person, it can be a weapon,
And I think that's a huge part of this. And so the hour is up, and we are going to take a short break. And when we come back, I have a few more questions for you, of course, on the same subject, but maybe veering us into a little bit different direction, because one of the things that I feel like is kind of misplaced in some ways, I guess, is a lot of the teachings I feel that Christ was talking about. And again, I have question as to whether or not, and the validity of Christ, right? Because it's a vibration, maybe an energy, an idea more than a human being. I don't know if that's all true, but that's, I want to go into all that when we come back.
Okay.
Okay. We'll be back in a minute. And welcome back, everyone. So, before we left for that short break, we were talking about Catholicism and the different aspects and how our society has perceived. And who we have speaking with us is Daniel Crumpton. Hi, Daniel. Are you still there?
I am here.
Good.
I always use my 3 names because it sounds like I'm an assassin.
Oh, I know. I kind of like that. Okay, sorry. Anyway, we also have Stephen and Gary with us. So before we took off, we were talking about how the different aspects of religion, like you had said, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Like, you can be selective, and Gary had even said something in our own chat, or maybe in the chat, that you can read something and decide for yourself. You don't have to swallow what everyone's saying.
Yeah.
But the trick to that is, in my opinion, is that with the Catholic Church and other heavy religions, it's not just the Catholic Church, because like Lutherans are very similar, and different denominations of Christianity. It's not like that. It's not like, okay, well, you can take this and perceive it for yourself. It's like this, and it's like this, and if you do this, then you're this. I mean, right. It's so set, and one of the things that, you'd said, that they seem to be so suppressive of women. Mm-hmm. But in the Bible, and you actually explained this to me, and I love it now. It's like, like they kind of symbolized that the woman was placed under the man in a suppressive, obedient type of way, where in reality, it's the woman, the structure of the tree, holding up the man and the family, right?
Right. In the Bible, it basically what it says is, I could pull it up for you, but you could look it up yourself. It says that the foundation of the entire spiritual totem is the woman, is the feminine. And men, and the Catholic Church included, have taken those passages way out of context, and was like, oh, that means that, when it says that the head of the woman is the man, and the head of the man is Christ, and the head of Christ is God, that means you're underneath me. But it's very much like a pyramid. No, the foundation of the entire structure to divinity is the feminine. And if you get into Hinduism or other proclivities of faith, they said that there's a yang and a yin. A father is the yang and the yin is the feminine. Father is the creator and mother is the sustainer of what was created. I mean, if it says in Genesis that we're created in God's image, in his likeness, then there has to be a feminine aspect. Has to be. Because we can't procreate without the feminine here. So why are we completely dismissing the feminine in the heavenlies? It makes no sense. It hasn't made sense for 2,000 years. And the only wiggle room that your Catholic Church has really given you is praying to Mother Mary. And that was a compromise.
But that even was, well, I don't know. I'm not even going to get into all of that because, again, it seems like, to me, it's once there starts to be a question about something, then all of a sudden, oh, well, it's really like this. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like right now there's all kinds of revisions being done by the Pope. I mean, he's like, He's like swinging high in comparison to what has been in comparison to the past.
That's because, and this is my opinion, but it's kind of what I see. That's because the Roman Catholic Church is being destroyed, and it's the appropriate time for it. And all of the religions that are associated with the Roman Catholic Church are going to go under too. Things like you're not able to hide the fact that Jesus was married anymore. You're not able to hide the fact that he had kids anymore.
They do.
Yeah.
They still do. I mean, it's like, if you say that to certain individuals, they'll be like, they'll fight you down over it, because that's been such a big part. Because how can you can't be married and have children and be this, like, floating guy, you know?
Oh, I don't know where they're getting that from. I mean, the Bible says that Jesus was tempted in every way that a man can be tempted. Well, to me, having in the past been married, how can he be tempted in every point unless he was tempted with adultery? That means he had to be married. But, I mean, and we don't even have to make those kind of logical leaps. We just look at the Gnostic Gospels.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah, sure. If he was tempted in every way that a man was, like the Bible says, he had to have been tempted in the way of having an affair. So he had to be married. I mean, that's just, you could take that from the Bible. Now, you're not going to get too many Christians that agree with you, whatever. But the question is, why is it important to them that he was not married and that he never had sex? Well, then you look at the priest class of the Roman Catholics.
Right.
Okay, well, now you're taking something away from them, because you've got to explain 2,000 something years of why their guys can't hook up with a chick. And, the Catholic Church isn't willing to do that.
Well, and I think that, I'm just going to jump right in here, and I know this is going to take us way, into another direction, but that, to me, it almost forces or enhances the pedophile situation and the young boys, because it's not like one or two priests. I mean, you're talking about a huge, massive amount of shit going on that we don't even know about.
Oh, yeah.
But you find a lot of that in Eastern religions as well, don't you? Like abstinence from sex.
Yeah, you do, but it's and like I said, this is my opinion. I'm not trying to build a church, but this is misinterpretations of the true intent of what I call internal alchemy, or transmutation of the sexual energies. In Gnosticism, people describe Gnosticism as a sex cult. Oh, you guys are a sex cult. No, that's not what we are. We understand the harvesting, cultivation, and proper use of the sexual energies. And in today's society, which I've been talking to people privately about this for a while now, in today's society, the masculine, the males, are conditioned, by advertising and by what is supposed to be attractive to, anytime that you get a chance to secrete your semen, do it. Well, okay. And we look at a society where we wonder why women live longer than males. If you look at Taoism or Taoism, however you want to say it, and Buddhism, they talk about the chi, right? And that women only lose their chi during menstruation. And men lose it whenever they release their semen. And then we wonder why men die younger than women,
Ooh, I have a question about this. Ooh.
Because people love asking about this topic.
Oh, yeah. Of course. Ta-da! Okay, so here's the thing about that. And I've had clients, I'm not going to use names, but I'll be fairly specific. I've had clients that have practiced abstinence, and it made them crazy.
Yeah.
And, it made them an asshole, it made them hypersensitive, it made them unhappy, and it wasn't the fact that they were thinking about sex all the time, it was a literal physical experience that they were having.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they started masturbating on a regular basis, instead of focusing on how they were going to get sex from their wife or their girlfriend or some chick on the street or the bar or whatever it was, all of a sudden that shifted for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, it's not about abstinence. It's about deciding how you're going to use that energy.
Right.
Because you may be losing a part, but it is also a very powerful energy that shoots up the Jacob's ladder, that shoots up the spine if it's not just given as like you're peeing. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's unfortunately that's the way that our culture, especially here in America, have been conditioned. Is that it's a biological function that you should do as much as possible. And, we see that everywhere. When abstinence is not the way to go, in my opinion, there are people who do practice it and have, great moments of enlightenment, but that's not my school of thought. But there's a proper use of that energy. Right. It is the most powerful energy. It is the creative energy of the universe,
See, and I guess too, like for myself, and I'm not saying that I'm, any kind of, I don't even want to get into my own sexual thing, but it's like, if every time a man or a woman gets that kind of excited feeling about another person, if they could learn to shoot that up their own spinal cord, mm-hmm. I know that kind of sounds weird, but it's like, instead of just focusing it in on your groin area or in on your main sexual content, like you shoot that up through your spine and allow it to kind of fill up your whole body. That, to me, is learning how to raise your vibration from a core level, right? Oh, yeah. And so that's another part of it's. I think that that's a misconception of the abstinence. It's not that you don't have sex or you don't masturbate or you don't do that. It's that you don't. That's not your focus all the time, because you're pushing that energy up through your body so that you can elevate yourself to a place of understanding, of actually evolving on this planet instead of rolling around in the shit that we see going on today.
Yeah.
The key word is energy, isn't it? Just seeing it as an energy, and not as something else, just feeling the energy within your body and getting to grips with that. And I've experimented with it for a little while, and just to get the feeling of that in the body and just know it intimately I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, and I recommend anybody who's listening who's interested in it. There's a book called The Heart of Tantra, or The Heart of Tantric Sex, I think. If anybody who's ever experienced tantric sex knows that once you have tantric sex, you can't go back to the worldly physical type, because the point of tantra is putting off what Americans or males in general see as, well, we're supposed. I'm going to use some very crude language, but you have to with this context. We're conditioned to believe that the sex act must conclude with an orgasm. That's the place that we're getting to. That's where it's all going to end. And therefore, you create time restraints, and you create energetic levels that must be attained to get to that. When you eliminate that this must conclude in an orgasm, then there is no timelessness. There's no time. You are in a state of timelessness. For example, anybody out there who is in a committed relationship, if you haven't been inside of your partner for at least 1 hour, with no incentive to kind of go anywhere, then you don't know her. You don't. And that's kind of the basis of Tantra, is this stillness, quietness, and there's no place to go. There's no culmination that must be attained, if that makes any kind of sense.
Well, it does.
Meditation, in a sense.
Yeah, and you pervert that type of, anybody who's experienced that, I mean, you do experience things like you can hear the other person's thoughts and stuff like that. You get into some metaphysical things when you start to practice Tantra. But
to me, that's communion,
Yeah, it's
in the truest sense.
Yeah, I mean, the whole universe is having sex. I mean, negative and positive energies, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a bad thing. And so obviously religion, quote unquote religion, is going to attack that, and they're going to take it to one or the other extreme. And they're going to say, you need to be completely celibate. That's not what it's talking about. It's not talking about being completely celibate. Or, you have what they call Black Tantra, which is, where you get your sex orgies and, satanic rituals and things like that, where they generate enough sexual energy to cast spells and things like that, but they're doing it in
I'm sorry, but I'm going to jump back in. That's also the basis of the fear,
mm-hmm.
right? And that's, and what, this is so disgusting. And I know that I talked about this not on our show last week, but on a different show. And I said I wasn't going to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. The Vatican, the Vatican and Catholicism reminds me of that dog festival in China. Do you know what I'm talking about, Daniel?
I am unfamiliar.
Oh my good God. So basically what they do is they take thousands of dogs and they torture in the streets like a parade, and they torture them and eat them.
Oh, God.
And it's not a joke. Like, I thought, the person that told me this was actually my teenage daughter, and I thought she was just, like, trying to get me going, you know what I mean? Because she knows that would just, like, totally just, anyway. And so I brought it up on the show, and everybody starts looking it up, and sure as shit.
It's true.
It's really true. And the reasoning behind it is because what they believe is that if you torture the animal and then eat it, that it is healing and also gives you power of the being, right? Like that fear that was going through that animal, the torture, the pain and all of that turned into some type of gifted power for the person that's consuming it.
Right. That's what these elite pedophiles get, the same kind of a power when they molest a child too. From the screaming and the fear, yeah.
So right there, to me, it's like, okay, we can see that, I mean, I think most Americans or most human beings that look at that in our society can see how completely disgusting that is and how wrong that is. It's like in Africa, them spreading around that if you have sex with a virgin, you'll be cured from AIDS. You know, those are the kind of things that just are horrific and cause so much pain and suffering to all kinds of other human beings. That's the Vatican. That's the Catholic Church to me. Like, that is exactly the epitome of, like, we're putting all these blame and we look at all these other things and we think, oh my God, they're so disgusting. And then here we are, 2016, having the same discussion about this organization that not only controls the money system, but, you know, is involved in wars and human torture. I mean, you just go down the list. It's like, oh my God, it's like way worse.
Yeah. And when I say things like we have to take certain aspects of Catholicism, don't hate the Catholic is ultimately what I'm saying. The individual Catholic, don't hate them, okay? The institution is the old Roman Empire. And the old Roman Empire, we know what it was all about. It was about taking a man and putting him in the place of a deity, with, you know, Julius Caesar being, you know, the most noteworthy. That is the purpose, the role, and the function of the Catholic Church, to take a man and put him in a seat of deity above you. And so that's been around as long as there's been popes. You know, it baffles my mind to see all these people kissing the Pope's ring. He's a man. He's a man, just like you.
Right.
You know? But that's the evil side of Catholicism. So try to take away from Catholicism what you appreciate, but understand that there is a system at work that they do have their fingers in all the wars and all the monetary shenanigans that's going on. You know, Santos and Jordan Maxwell talk a lot about your birth certificate. You know, Daniel Louis Crumpton is not my quote unquote Christian name. And that came about at a very early age when I read the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah says when you change your name, you change your fate. And this is me, this is my personal belief, and I've had metaphysical experiences, is that when you do change your name from what is on your legal birth certificate to something else, you do get a grasp on your own destiny. And so this speaks to every religion. If you follow any religion, there's always a name change. Abraham was Abram. Sarai became Sarah. You know, all of your saints. In Islam, everybody changes their name to something that they uniquely picked. And if you go to modern society with movie culture, and you find one of the greatest movies of enlightenment is obviously the Matrix trilogy, you have Neo, whose name was Thomas Anderson, and he gets very, very, nitpicky when his antithesis is calling him by his Matrix name. You know, my name is Neo. He says with a passion, right? Well, where does this thing about the name come from? Well, the name, literally, name means no one, nobody. And your birth certificate, the Vatican gets a copy of that. And
I still don't understand all that. I mean, I know I'm not doubting it by any freaking means. It doesn't. But it's like, how is that because your bloodline? Because I thought, well, it makes sense with the money system as well. But I thought, your birth certificate is worth a certain amount of money because of either your bloodline or, there's all these different things that add up to what your value is as a corporation, not as a human being. And so if that's also sent to the Vatican, again, my God, it's like, how can you, I hear what you're saying about, well, don't hate the Catholic. Okay, I get that. I have, like I love Rhonda. I'm not going to stop loving her because she has a certain belief. But I still am going to, every time she brings it up to me, be like, how the fuck can you even go there? Like, how does your mind wrap itself around anything like that? How can you not see that it's total indoctrination? How can you not see that they are bending everyone over and doing their, whatever they want on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Not just the Catholics. We're talking the human race.
Right.
I guess my question is, with the like you say, Daniel, what a lot of the stuff that's being said. If you read the Bible, you're saying, right, it's not really there in the Bible. It's, if you read it properly, then these things aren't there. So I guess my question is, what is it they hand out in churches? I think a lot of people have that question. If you can just read the Bible yourself and get the truth, then what is the reason that people aren't doing this? Why are they listening to someone else? And what channel are they listening to this information through? Is it what's being preached in church, or?
No, it's spiritual slothfulness. Ultimately, that's what it is. It's spiritual slothfulness. The preacher can stand up there all day long and say, go home and read your Bible, don't take my word for it. And I've sat under many sermons where that was said. But until the person sitting in the pew individually actually does it,
so essentially the power is with the people.
Yeah. I didn't get out of Orthodox Christianity until I sat down with that book and I said, I'm going to read this from one cover to the next without any outside input. And I'm going to see what I get. And if you don't have that in a religion or a denomination or a sect, that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with people who are spiritually slothful. And they expect the preacher or the priest or whoever to do their thinking for them.
So essentially, it's like you said earlier, it's an internal thing that happens. So it doesn't matter what you're being fed from the outside. You're looking for something from the outside anyway.
Yeah, man.
Hindu. Since you were 2.
Do what now?
No, so if you've been getting that since you were 2 years old, you know what I'm saying? Like if you were reared in a Catholic religion. Or like in your case, it took you a lot of years to rebel. And if you look at the family unit, how many out of your family unit rebelled?
Very few.
Exactly right. And so some of them just swallowed it whole from the moment of birth. You know what I mean?
And they believe that they are, the most righteous people on earth while doing the most harm.
Oh, it's so true. That's the horrifying thing. I think that again, it's like these people, even in the news circles, if you are leading others down a path of misdirection, if you're pulling people out of one box and pulling them into another, it's not any better. But it's like, can't we all agree or take a look at the box that we've been living in and at least agree that this planet's fucked up? Like, we're not all living in our place of joy and happiness and peace. And I'm not saying that it always is going to be love and light. Experiences and emotions and all those things have huge, vast amounts of balance. Mm-hmm. But the way that our society is being held now, this is a prison planet. And it's not because of outside sources. It's because of how we have allowed our banking system, basically, and the religious factor. So they take a hold of survival, the fear, and then throw religion in there. And it's like they've got the most, they're more powerful than any nuclear weapon we could ever think of.
Not really. It's a big topic that we're talking about.
There's only 4 countries, and I don't know how many countries there are. I know that the U.S. is involved in 160 countries military-wise, but there are only 4 countries in the world that are not under the same money structure system, the Vatican, the whole idea. There's only 4.
Right.
And those are the ones that are being attacked right now under war.
Yeah, well, it's my personal opinion. This is just me, like I said, that the prophecies of the Bible are true, but heavily misinterpreted, heavily. And I do believe that we are in what most people would call the apocalypse, which doesn't mean the end of the world or all that. The revelation means the unveiling, the revealing, and it's called people who call it revelations really get under my skin. No, the book is called The Revelation of Jesus Christ. And what the entire book really is about is to reveal, to unmask a lot of these misconceptions that religion has put on the person of Christ. To unveil him.
Aquarian.
Do what?
They're coming into Aquarian, like you had said before.
Right. But it's to give us this bigger view of what the Christ is. I'm of the opinion, this is me, I don't believe that Messiahs come in the sky. They never do that. They always come through the back door in a manger or something like that. The second coming of Christ that was prophesied in the Bible and what these Christian churches will tell you is actually the Christ within all of us. It's not one man, one carpenter coming back. It's this Christ spirit that's inside of all of us awakening. And you had somebody in the chat room talking about the Kundalini. Well, the Bible, like I said, the Bible, when it talks about Christ, if you really want to, go through your Bible and mark out the word Christ and put Kundalini. That's exactly what it's talking about. Christ is a title. It's not the guy's last name. It's a title of somebody who is awake and aware, like a Buddha. And so you see this all throughout the Bible, this Kundalini. Whenever you get to the New Testament and it starts talking about the 7 unwise virgins that had no oil in their lamps, and then the 7 wise virgins that have oil in their lamps, that's talking about your chakra system, your Kundalini essence, and then that ties back into the sexual energy. Not having oil in your lamps means you're a foolish virgin. Having oil in your lamps or in your chakra system means you're a wise virgin. Your lamps are lit. And then we get to the menorah, 7 lights. We get to the book of the Revelation. We talk about 7 spirits, which are fires in front of God, which are the 7 spirits of God. It's all talking about the Kundalini with different words. And so, as a society, now that we have the information that we do about Kundalini and Tantraism and harnessing all this type of energy, this prophecy of a quote-unquote apocalypse is taking place. But it's not fire and brimstone. It's not, locusts storming the earth. It's all of us awakening in our own time to these deeper truths to where the city on 7 hills, which we know to be Rome, is going to fall because they won't have any power over us once we all know this.
Catholic Church, in my opinion, that's when they're talking about Rome, that's the falling of the Catholic Church. To me. I'm not saying that that's true, but that's the interpretation. It's like, because if the Catholic Church were exposed and it were all to come to truth, people would have to see and evaluate how the entire world has been duped for however long that they have been in control.
Right. And
say, Sherri?
Yes?
I got a question. I think there was a time, a long time ago, that the Catholic Church was a good institution, but I think it was taken over by these elite pedophile groups and more or less hijacked.
I mean, it could be. What do you think about that?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I think the powers that be that are in the Catholic Church, especially in our circles, we talk about the Illuminati. The they, the them, it's always some force, some dark force outside of us. I think they've been using the Roman Catholic Church as a vehicle, but they did it with the Sanhedrin too, before the Roman Catholic Church was instituted. Let's not fool ourselves. If you study the Sanhedrin, it is the Catholic Church. It's the Catholic religion. They just, like I said, with Poltergeist, they moved the tombstones, but they didn't move the names. So, this power base that's inside the Vatican, which is powerful, does have its hand in all of these things. But I'm not gonna sit here and tell you if we go and we destroy Vatican City, then everything will be fixed, because ultimately that's not gonna work. We have to do it on an internal level. What we have to do, all you really have to do to take power away from somebody that has power over you, is to stop acknowledging their power.
Yeah, nobody has power.
Yeah. You just ignore it. You ignore their power, quote unquote power.
Okay, so I agree with that 100%, and I go there, but I also think that the way that we have set up our society, it's not as easy as, I mean, you can say that, but when you gotta pay your electric bill, or you have to have a place to live, or you have to go to work, or you have to drive a car, you know what I'm saying? There's a list of things that still indoctrinate you, unless you're gonna run to a treehouse or live on your own land and not be incorporated at all, that they have their hands in every single aspect of our being. You know? I mean, it's not just about the Catholic Church. I mean, you're talking about our money system, and that includes how they're charging us for electricity, how they're charging us for water, how they're charging us for, you know, everything within our judicial system, how it costs us money to drive, and yet our taxes are the ones that supposedly build the road. You know what I mean? It's like this whole fucking dynamic that is just so convoluted, and there's so many pieces to the puzzle that it becomes almost like, it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, that I feel you. You know, I'm not oblivious to the fact that it seems that in order to function in society, you have to somehow fuel the machine. And, you know, that's a problem that's a problem that I face every day, and it's a problem that we're all going to face, you know. And I'm going to have to think long and hard on what my solutions to that would be, because
I have an idea if you want to hear it.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, not that it always works for me, but one of the things that, if we're talking about energy, right? If we're talking about, it's really not about those things. Like, those are just the material outcome of what they want, right? Whatever whatever the powers that be, whatever it's about. Then maybe instead of trying to disconnect, maybe we just change the vibration within, right? Again, it's like, so I work, you know, when I start to feel like the pressures of, oh shit, I can't pay this, or I'm not going to be able to pay this, or I have teenage, you know, whatever comes in, instead of falling into the story, and I'm not always the best at this, but I'm working on it, is that instead of falling into the story, I just remind myself over and over again, the universe wants to show up for me, which would be God or whatever you want to term that, wants to show up for me, and that basically the whole idea is to just keep my mind on peace, love, joy, peace, love, joy, peace, love, joy, peace, love, joy. Even if I'm just bullshitting myself in some way, like I really don't feel that much peace, love, or joy, but if I keep saying it long enough, I either get distracted and forget whatever I was talking about or thinking about or putting the energy into, right? Maybe like when you go to the grocery store and you're buying the shit that, you know, we're eating or whatever, when we're preparing it, we put the love and we wish the being that it came from back into a space that it comes into, a place of love. You know, I mean, I don't know that all that really has that much effect, but I feel like, what else do you do?
It has a great effect, for one. Things like that have a bigger effect than you think. And it's a difficult topic that you're bringing up, because it's a positive thing that we all collectively realize that we're living in a world that's not quite right. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. You know, to some level, all of us agree. You know, this world is not what it's supposed to be. And how do we begin to change it? Well, if we start to look at the world as this big system that's, you know, it's in our money, it's in our food supply, it's in our grocery stores, we can't avoid it, then we feel like David versus Goliath. Well, we don't need to be David. We need to be Goliath. All right. And the only way that I know in my life is, I heard Joe Rogan say one time, he said that he talked to a therapist, and the therapist said the best way to live your life is pretend that you and your closest friends or family actually run the world. And that right there, that piece of information is true. You know, you're not ever going to change the world in this big Titanic type way. All you have to do is change yourself. It's not a hard task. And so, does that mean going to the grocery store and finding that one item that has absolutely no GMO at all? No, not at all. It means going to the grocery store and finding the least damage that you can do to yourself, you know. And when you train yourself to do that type of thing, do the least amount of damage to myself, you will set yourself up on a path. And eventually you will achieve, you know, no damage, no harm, no suffering, no samsara.
Well, what about the, and I want you to answer this, because we're coming up like on 20 minutes, and because when you say that, I get it, right? But I also believe that we have the ability, we are manifestors, we are creators, regardless of what people want and how they want to go there. So do you believe that in your aspects or in the Bible somewhere, when Jesus talks about turning water to wine, right, or turning fish, whatever it was, I'm not going to claim, I don't want to like spout out a whole bunch of stuff and have everybody rip me up about it, but it's like, to me, that's, if when you're preparing your food and you're putting your light or their light or the light back into it, the love, the whatever it is, and consuming that, do you think that can change or alter the whole idea or the manifestation of the food so that it doesn't really matter? You could eat a freaking cardboard box, and if you're loving it and you think that's the best thing in the world, that may just be enough to keep you alive,
I do. I do believe in that. And that's, I guess you'd call that transmutation, which is, now, me personally, I don't eat meat. I don't eat, anything with blood in the veins. Okay? Now, but I also believe what you just said, which is if you did put a steak in front of me, okay, and I pray over it and I say, Goddess, thank you for this steak. May you transmute all the foul ingredients into positive. I do believe that will work. Okay? So, like I said, I'm not building a church or religion. However, for me, I know that animals in our consumption circles, I know that all the animals that if you go to a grocery store and you go to the beef aisle, that 90% of that meat is from one company. I know that. I also know how they're born and raised and slaughtered. I know that. Okay. Now, me knowing that makes me personally not want to eat meat. Okay. So that's me. I have that knowledge, that intimate knowledge that you really don't want to take that into your body because you're absorbing that frequency. Like the Native Americans said, you are what you eat. I will not do it. Okay. Does that mean that you're not as spiritual as me or you can't transmute the energy? I have a friend who's a witch that she does eat meat. She eats venison and things like that. But her perspective is, I hunted for that animal. I went out into the woods and I hunted that animal down and I killed it. And so that is a type of a sacrifice to the goddess. Okay, well, I get that and I appreciate that and I respect that. Because to her, there was a process of worship in getting that meat, okay? So, what I say is let your own conscience convict you when it comes to stuff like that. I don't eat meat. I know that in my personal life, it's made me feel better. It's made me more emotionally stable. I don't panic as much. I'm not afraid of things as much. I'm not angry. I know that is a first-hand experience. It may not be that for you, So.
Well, here's the other part of it, because I was reared very different than a lot of people, and so, eating meat is okay. In my circles, or how I was reared, it's okay to eat meat. But again, first of all, in most places, you should be growing your own. You should be creating your own. You should be having your own farms or going to places where the people personally.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like most people are like, yeah, right, I live in the city, blah, blah, blah. Well, you'd be amazed at how much there is out there, like little small farms that are struggling and that need support and would love to have somebody come in and buy a half a cow. There's all kinds of stuff that people can do. And the difference in that, to me, is that then, and this sounds, I even saying it out loud, it kind of is like iffy to me, but it's like they were sacrificed in a way that was still in a loving whatever, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't like...
It wasn't traumatic.
Right. And it's like, and also to give nourishment to another and all these other things, it's like almost asking them if it's okay. I know that probably seems like, how would you do that? But it seems like on some level there's communion even through the animals, it's like, because you've got the tiger who's going to eat whatever it can and, all these other things. And as human beings, people can say, and I'm not a big meat eater. I don't like and when you bring that up to me or I hear something like that, I probably won't eat meat for a while. But it's like, it kind of, it takes out a piece, right? Because the human body does consume it.
I'll tell you this. This is what kind of, I watched the documentary called Food Inc., but then I went to jail. And like I told you before, I always read great books in jail. But I read a Star Trek novel called The Prometheus Project. And essentially what the story was the human race was being experimented upon by a superior alien race in a different dimension. And when Captain Kirk and the crew get to confront them, you know, they say, what are you doing to us? Why are you torturing us in your labs? Why are you traumatizing us? Why are you turning us into food when we're sentient living beings? And the species answered, the crew, and they said, how can you judge us? You do it to what you deem inferior species. You have lab rats. You eat cow and chicken. So you have the gall to judge us for treating you as cattle when you do the same thing yourself. And to me, that hit home. And I go, oh my God, I do not like being terrorized. I don't like being surrounded by fear and trauma. Why would I do that to an animal? And that's me. Okay, that's me. If somebody out there listening doesn't agree with that, I'm not going to sit there and say, you're going to hell because you ate, a steak at all. I am telling you that my life has been better. A lot of other people's lives have been better. If you go back and you look at history, all of your geniuses say that they would not eat meat. It enhances your brain capacity. In Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, it's heavily in favor of vegetarianism. And why? Because if you go out and you look at a tree, the tree's been standing there for hundreds of years, but it's not eating cow. It's holding itself up to the light. It's got its roots founded in Earth, Mother Earth, and it's reaching up to the light of the sun. So to me, it makes sense that if I want longevity in life, if I want youth and health, that I'm supposed to consume that which is of the light, which is, fruits and vegetables and, not meat.
Water. A lot of water.
A lot of water. Yeah.
A lot of water. And I think it's interesting because, I don't have a big thing on food. Like, I'm not a big food consumer. So, and I eat fairly healthy, but I'll also at night sit down and eat Captain Crunch if it's here.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not going to claim to be any kind of, food anything, but I am conscious of, like, I do grow my own food. I grow a ton of almost everything. And, I think that in doing that, it does make me realize that, like, if I were to rear chickens, there's no way in hell I could eat one of them.
Right.
There's no way. I would have them in my bedroom before I would, be able to actually cook them. There's just no way. Now, eggs, yeah, I think I could go there, like, I feel like that's, for some reason, they're not that cute, whatever. I can, wrap my mind around that.
Well, let's not fool anybody. I mean, there's a guy who's going around on YouTube right now. I think he goes by JP Sears or Spears, and he is absolutely hilarious. And he's kind of poking fun at spiritual people, but he's making a lot of good points. And, I know a lot of spiritual people who meditate and all that. They've gotten upset with his videos, but I think they're fabulous because we can't take ourselves too seriously. Look, I don't eat meat. I try to live in a healthy manner, but if you think that for 1 second every now and then I don't get a craving for like a Monster energy drink and buy that motherfucker, you know what I mean? Come on, man. I mean, all of it, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, cigarettes. I'm addicted to cigarettes. So I'm not your health guru, but I'm saying in areas that you can find change, do it. In small increments and then work up.
Yeah. And don't you think too, I agree. There is a lot to do no harm, in my opinion. And if you're not harming, and it includes yourself, but that's kind of individual, if you're harming yourself, well, that's kind of on you. But when you're contributing to the harm of masses, and you're talking, we don't know, cows could be from, we could all be from some different planet, and we're all different alien races, and we're all really on the same level, but here to do different things, and we're, completely enslaving these other races, mm-hmm. and torturing and killing them. What is the karmic debt of that shit? Whoa.
I think it's a lot. That's why I don't. I know, like, if you read in the Old Testament after the flood, God told Noah, the fear of you and the dread of you will be in the beast. And I know that when you stop eating meat, animals like you more. They'll come up to you, like when you're walking in the public park or something like that. You'll see birds flocking to you, and dogs they want to come near you, and all kinds of things like that, because they don't feel that terror and that trauma that you consumed. We know that whenever you do consume a certain thing over and over again, it does change your genetic makeup. So if you eat a lot of cow, you become more like cattle. If you eat a lot of chicken, you become more chicken-hearted. This stuff is true. I mean,
So where does that go then with, why would it be believed on different levels? I mean, this isn't just like the Chinese. Like when I was researching this, I found it was like all over the place. That killing something in trauma and eating it is actually, it gives the person some kind of a power. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's almost the opposite of what would really seem to be happening. Like, why would they project that? Why would they?
Okay, well, that gets into a totally different topic, but I'll try to surmise it in the 9 minutes we have. If you ever watch Red Dragon, which is a part of the Hannibal Lecter series, there's a part in that movie that's really revelatory, and it's whenever Will Graham, the investigator, is standing in front of the FBI psychologist, and he says, this one is going to go on and on and on. And one of the FBI agents says, why? And Will Graham says, because it makes him God. Would you give that up? Well, in spirituality, the Kundalini or the awakening or the third eye or, touching nirvana, it's all the same thing. It all means the same thing. It's having this thing called samadhi, which is intimate knowledge of the divine. There are two ways, from my experience, that you can access it. One is through, proper internal alchemy, which is harvesting, the sexual energies, eliminating meat, yoga, breathing, things like that. Another way is through trauma. And this can artificially stimulate the pineal gland to shoot out a dose of dimethyltryptamine. And this is why, serial killers, they have a tough time quantifying serial killers. Why do they go by patterns? Why do they always have to have a trophy? Why this? Or why are they relating to some zodiac sign or some animal? And it's because of the stimulation of the pineal gland through trauma. Typically at a young age, they were probably either sexually molested or physically abused in some way to where it stimulated that gland. Unfortunately, they took a path in life that they wanted to experience that God feeling more and more. And so they moved up to animal sacrifice and then eventually at least to people. Well, it's the same feeling of being God. When you stimulate that gland through trauma or through proper exercises, it's that feeling of being God. It's like a drug. You want more and more. And that's why we see them doing what they do. And so you see people like that gravitating towards the Catholic Church and organizations like the Freemasons is because they've got a taste of that. And they need an outlet or an organization or an avenue to exercise that with free reign.
Sorry, I was muted. How horrifying. I mean, I know that makes so much sense. And it really probably is more human nature than it is as horrifying as it feels to me. But it still is so shocking to me that in this day and age, that so much of society is still following in a path that has led to so much destruction and so much misery and so much unhappiness and poverty. And I mean, down the list of how many Americans are living below a poverty level right now. It's phenomenal. And so, excuse me, when they're talking about all of these things and how we're evolving and we're moving forward, and I think if people could be more focused on what they're doing on the inside and what they're doing in their own house and what they're doing in their own neighborhoods, instead of worrying about how they're going to please God and Jesus and all these other people.
Well, it's like Hinduism said, okay? If God was going to hide itself, it would do so in the heart of man. That's the last place they would look.
Yeah.
It's the last place that we look. The simplest way that I know how to live is be good to yourself when you wake up. Whenever you wake up, be good to yourself, first. Whatever happened yesterday, that's over with. Forgive yourself. Be good to yourself. And then whenever you interact with people throughout your day, realize that they are just an extension of yourself, and treat them good too. You don't have to agree with everything they do, say, or believe. You just have to allow them. I don't get in arguments with Christians. I don't get in arguments with Catholics. I don't get in arguments with people like that because I can speak their language. If they are at Virgin Mary, Peter, Paul, Mark, Luke, John, all that, I can speak to that level. I don't have to disprove anything they believe. I can translate what I believe into their words. And so we don't have to defeat it. We just have to acknowledge its limited thinking. I might get in trouble for saying that, but it's the truth.
It is true. It's a box.
When you're dealing with religions, you're dealing with limited thinking. And so don't get mad. You don't get mad at little kids for, doing what little kids do. They just don't know. They don't know. And so with religious people, that's the way that you need to behave, is they don't know. So speak to them in their language. You don't have to wear the fact that you're a witch on your sleeve.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't have to. What are you trying to prove when you do that? Nothing. Right. So if somebody's coming at you with a Catholic persuasion or a Christian persuasion, hear them out and then translate what they're saying in your own words. And then you'll know how to respond.
And that is fabulous advice, and I'm so glad that I had this show today because of all of the stuff that kind of went on, even though Rhonda and I did connect and talked for over an hour, and there's not conflict between us. But this was really eating at me, and so I really do feel like there's been a lot of clarification today. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Steve. Everybody in the chat. I hope you all have a great weekend. This is the end of the show, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks again, Daniel.
No problem.
Okay, just so that everybody is aware, I wanted to come back on and give everyone a chance to have the sites and the information about how to reach and listen to some of the things that Daniel's doing. He's a fantastic author, and his books can bring a lot of the same light that he gave us today. So, Daniel, can you give us all that information real quick?
Okay, yeah, commercial.
Go, Daniel, go.
First and foremost, people can find me on Facebook. I'm real approachable. It's Daniel Louis Crumpton. Just tell me, where you heard me from and whatever you want to talk about, I'm up for it. You can find my novel, Then Came the Flood, which is about the antediluvian world before the flood of Noah. It's based off the Book of Enoch. You can find that at Amazon or Books A Million, Barnes & Nobles, all those websites. You can get those, or go to your local bookstore. Right now I am writing a serial novel called Downloaded Content. That's kind of the working title. You can go to zeninthecar.com, ZENINTHECAR.com/DLC to read those. And I'm also launching a new website called downloadedcontent.com probably in the next month. And that'll be kind of my home base after this month goes by. But those are the main places you can reach me.
Well, I think those are plenty of, you're fabulous. I really do appreciate your perspective, and thank you again for coming on the show.
No, it's the least I can do in my pajamas.
Eating dinner, it was fabulous.
Yeah.
All right. Ciao, everyone.
Downloaded Content Podcast. Downloaded Content.com.